Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today I'm going to be ranking every single drift tunable car in Grand Theft Auto Online. So these aren't cars that are just able to drift, these are cars that have the special drift tuning modification that is available through the Los Santos car meet. Now we got quite a few of these vehicles in the game now, 12 to be specific, and apparently a 13th on the way, which is slated to be the Karen Futo, the regular one, that's been in GTA Online since October 1st. 2013. But that has not come out yet, so we're just doing the 12 that are currently available as of right now. If you guys enjoyed the video, a like is of course appreciated. If not, dislike. Consider subscribing to my channel if you guys are new. I'm going for 300k this year and I need your help to get there. Let's go ahead and get started with number 12. So at number 12, we have the Classy Drift Yosemite coming in at $981,000. That's if you have the trade price. Now, if you don't, it's going to run you $1,308,000. The Drift Yosemite remains as the worst of all of the drift tunable vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online. The biggest issue that this vehicle has is due to its size. And unfortunately, not being able to squeeze between vehicles in the streets of Los Santos is a relatively large issue when it comes to drifting in free mode. Even still though, in drift races, you will face issues with this vehicle because of how big it is and squeezing into tight spaces. Now it's very unfortunate, but this vehicle just simply wasn't destined to be great at drifting in GTA Online. It's very sad. I think it's a cool car. I think it's a cool concept, but it just isn't that great. Next up at number 11, we have one of the newest drift tunable cars in the game, which is the Volcar Nebula Turbo. Coming in at $797,000. The Nebula Turbo has been a quote-unquote drift car for the entire time that it has existed in Grand Theft Auto Online. So when I found out that they were adding drift tuning to the vehicle, I was pretty excited because it was always somewhat decent to drift as it was. Now my disappointment when I actually got to drive the vehicle with the drift tune was very surprising. This vehicle has a really hard time breaking traction and getting any sort of angle when drifting, and it's also very inconsistent, I found, which was also quite annoying. Sadly, I just don't think this thing turned out very well, and despite this thing being similar to one of the very best drift tunable cars in GTA Online, at least in terms of wheelbase and power and things like that, it's just not very well put together. It just doesn't do it for me. Obviously, this varies person to person, but in my opinion, the Volcar Nebula Turbo has got to be one of the worst drift tunable cars in the game, which is very sad and very disappointing. I think it could have been really great, but unfortunately, we got let down. Now at number 10, we have the Anis Euros coming in at $1,350,000, and that is with the trade price. If you do not have the trade price, it's going to run you $1,800,000. Now the Anis Euros has disappointed me from day one of it existing in GTA Online. While it is actually pretty decent at drifting, it still left me wanting more from the vehicle. And it's really easy to change direction in this car, I did find, and I would say it's actually too easy in fact. This leads to the car spinning out a lot more often than I'd like it to, and I think that the issue is due to the weird weight balance that this car seems to possess, but I can't really be sure. It's so sad that such an iconic car like the 370Z was so disappointing and continues to disappoint at every opportunity. I really hope with GTA 6 Rockstar does better with the 370Z. I feel like it deserves it. It could have been such an awesome car, but the customization on this thing was pretty disappointing, as well as the whole rear end of the car being super wonky looking. This thing is just, it's such a shame that it's not how it should have been. At number 9, we had the Classy Drift Tampa coming in at $995,000. Now initially I thought that the Drift Tampa was pretty terrible when it came to the drift tuning in GTA Online, and I actually ranked it as the second worst drift car in the game when it first came out. However, with the changes to the drifting mechanics over the past few months since they initially came out, the car has actually become a lot better, at least in my opinion, and I think that the new drift handling suits the car a lot better than it did previously. Now it's still a relatively massive car, which is why it isn't higher on the list, but it certainly can drift, as the name would suggest. It just is a little bit on the big side still, so going through traffic in free mode and even in some of the drift races, the Tampa is a little bit on the long side but also quite wide, so it can be a bit of a struggle to get through traffic and things like that. At number 8, we have the Anis Remus coming in at $1,027,500 if you have the trade price. Now if you don't, it's going to be $1,370,000. The Remus is one of the more consistent drift cars in GTA Online. However, what I think doesn't work for the Remus is the relatively long wheelbase that this car possesses. It has a very long hood, a very long cabin, and even the rear end of the car is also quite long, especially in comparison to the S13, which it is primarily based off of. Now, it seems to have a bit of a harder time breaking traction, and I do think this is due to the longer wheelbase, which makes the drifting feel less consistent and just generally worse, honestly. I still think it's one of the better drift cars. I think it's one of the very best looking drift cars in the game. It's actually one of my favorite Tuners DLC cars, but it just simply isn't the best with the drift tuning modification. Next up at number 7, we have the Dinka Jester RR, costing $1,477,500 if you got the trade price, and if you don't, it's going to cost you $1,970,000, so a little on the expensive side for this vehicle. Now, the Dinka Jester RR is one of the OG drift cars that first got the drift tuning modification. I ranked it at number 4 originally, and I still think it is just as good as it was when I initially ranked it. We've just had some more heavy hitters come out with the last update, and that has kind of knocked it down a few places in all honesty. But the Jester RR has a really good balance for drifting while also being relatively small and pretty powerful. I think this car is actually one of the best drift cars in the game, and it has just unfortunately simply been overshadowed, at least in my opinion. I think that some of the newer cars just simply do what it does, but just a little bit better, a little bit more consistently. At number 6, we have the Ubermacht Sentinel Classic Widebody, costing $650,000 for the initial purchase of the Sentinel Classic, plus an additional $700,000 for the Benny's upgrade to become the widebody variant. Now, this is one of the newest drift tunable cars in GTA Online, and the Sentinel Classic Widebody is just a slightly mildly better version of the Jester RR. It has pretty much the same great handling while just being slightly smaller and a little bit lighter, which does come into play when you are drifting in GTA Online, at least in my opinion. The Sentinel Classic Widebody is a car that very much deserves to have the drift tuning available for it, and I'm very grateful to see that Rockstar actually felt the same way and added drift tuning to this vehicle. It's super awesome, it feels really good. It's just not the best. It's very close to being the best. Basically the top 6 on this list, they're all very close to each other, at least in my opinion. Next up, we got number 5, and at number 5 we have the Fathom FR36, coming in at $1,610,000. The FR36 still to this day is one of the best overall cars for the drift races, I do believe, and it has a good balance of power, acceleration, and holding angle, as well as overall handling ability. However, it is a little tiny bit on the larger side, only very slightly though, and I personally don't find this car to be the best with the changes that have happened to drift tuning since this car initially released. Back when the cars were more all-wheel drive feeling, this thing felt absolutely incredible. But with them feeling a little bit more on the rear wheel drive side of things, it just got a little bit worse for me. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still an awesome vehicle, I still love it. I just think, similarly to the Jester RR, it has been overshadowed in some ways by some of the newer vehicles. Next up, we got number 4, and at number 4, I've decided to put the Ubermacht Cypher. Now, the Cypher goes for $1,162,500 if you got the trade price. Now, if you don't, it's going to be $1,550,000. And out of the 3 drift tunable cars that were released with the last DLC, at least on day 1, the Ubermacht Cypher definitely feels the best to me. I think it's the most consistent, it's got the best handling, and generally the best performance, and it seems to be the easiest to hold angle out of all of them, at least in my opinion. It's also one of the smaller drift cars, plus it has some of the best customization in the entire game and looks awesome while also being able to pull off these sick drifts. I think the Ubermacht Cypher is definitely deserving of the number 4 spot on this list. It certainly is one of the best drift cars in the entire game, at least in my opinion. At number 3, we got the Annis ZR350. Costing you $1,211,750 to $1,615,000 if you don't have the trade price. Now, the ZR350, despite all of the changes made to drift tuning over the past few months, has remained one of the most consistent and overall best drift cars in the game. Now, it is relatively small, and it is pretty good at breaking traction, as well as changing direction, but also holding angle at the same time. I feel like it simply is superior to the cars that we've previously mentioned on this list, and I certainly think it looks better than a lot of them as well. And for the price, I feel like it's pretty good. The CR350 definitely deserves to be pretty high up on the list. I think it's an awesome vehicle generally, and it certainly is awesome with the drift tuning applied to it. Next up at number 2, we have the Karen Futo GTX, costing you $1,192,500 for the initial purchase price. Now, if you have the trade price, that is what you're going to be required to pay. But if you don't have the trade price, it's going to cost you $1,590,000. Now, the Karen Futo GTX was previously the #1 best drift tunable car in GTA Online, and it wasn't just me who thought that. A lot of people actually agreed with me, and as somebody who absolutely hated this car, it really did earn my respect so much that I wasn't afraid to tell the truth that I thought it was honestly the best drift car in the game. It's super small, very light, it brakes traction easily, holds decent angle, looks great, changes direction like you wouldn't believe, and has awesome customization, all while also being one of the cheaper drift tunable cars in GTA Online. I think this thing is genuinely really awesome, and I still think there is a case to be made for it being the #1 best drift tunable car in the game. There is a car that I feel like is just a little tiny bit better. And at number 1, we have the brand new Benefactor Vorschlag Hammer, costing you $1,790,000, so it is quite expensive. In fact, I do believe it is the most expensive car on the entire list. Now, I swear I'm not just putting this car up here because it is the newest drift tunable car in the game or because I love Mercedes. This thing just simply feels so damn consistent and predictable to me, and I could not skip putting it here at the #1 spot. I think that somehow the longer wheelbase of the Vorschlag Hammer works to its advantage, whereas on most other vehicles I feel like this would be a little bit of a disadvantage, but on this vehicle it makes it feel so controllable mid-slide compared to a lot of the other cars, and despite it being a little bit on the bigger side of things, I still find it super easy to get in between traffic just because of how much control you have with this vehicle. It's very confidence inspiring, it's super easy to slide, and it's very easy to control and get out of a slide if need be. The Vorschlag Hammer is an awesome vehicle, the customization is super sweet. I'm thrilled that we have this in GTA Online, and I think a lot of other people are too. I think it's the best car from the new DLC, honestly, and it certainly is the best drift tunable car in GTA Online, at least in my humble opinion. So there you have it, guys. Those are my rankings for every drift tunable car in GTA Online. Let me know what you thought of my list in the comment section down below, and actually shoot me some predictions for where you think the regular Karen Futo that has yet to have the drift tuning added to it is going to rank on this list whenever I update it in the future when that car releases. If you made it to the end of the video, comment a 7 down below in the comment section. Leave a like if you enjoyed, dislike if you didn't, of course, or if I offended you with one of my picks. Consider subscribing if you guys enjoy my content. I'm going to be posting a lot more stuff in the future related to drifting as well as everything else GTA Online. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care. Peace.